You know, she said, smoothing the skirt of her red dress with both hands and glancing at me sideways. Most men would have asked me to find another table. I looked up slowly. I'm not most men. She'd sat down uninvited, stolen my corner table at Russo's on a hot August night in Charleston, and somehow made it feel like I was the one who'd gotten lucky. Her car was dead at the curb. Her phone was dying. And she had absolutely no idea she was about to change everything. And hey, how's your August treating you? Did you get away somewhere this summer? Maybe visit family or old friends? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to know. Because our two are about to have the kind of August that people write stories about. Stay with us, because it only gets better from here. My name is Thomas Birch. I'm 29 years old, a freelance architect, and the kind of man who always checks twice that his keys are in his pocket before leaving the house. I make lists. I show up early. I measure twice and cut once, professionally and personally. I used to think that was enough, that if you were careful enough, precise enough, loyal enough, life would return the favor. I was wrong about that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story starts on a Thursday evening in August in Charleston, South Carolina, where the heat doesn't just sit on your skin, it moves in with you, unpacks its bags, and helps itself to whatever's left in your refrigerator. It was the kind of evening where the air smelled like warm pavement and jasmine, and the whole city moved just a little bit slower than it should. I had been sitting alone at a corner table inside Russo's, a small Italian place on the corner of King and Calhoun, for exactly 11 minutes. I know because I'd checked my watch twice. The restaurant was dim in the way that feels intentional, rather than cheap. All warm amber light and the low hum of a Frank Sinatra record nobody was really listening to. I'd ordered a glass of Chianti, opened the menu, and was doing my best impression of a man who had somewhere to be and someone to come home to. I had neither. The Chianti was there mostly, so I didn't have to explain to the waiter why I kept showing up alone. I'd chosen Russo's for a reason that wasn't about the food. My old apartment, the one I used to share with my life, my plans, and what I thought was a partnership, was 6 blocks away. My new apartment was quieter, cleaner, and felt like a hotel room that didn't particularly want me there. Thursday evenings I used to spend reviewing project proposals with my business partner, Daniel Kress. That was before Daniel quietly restructured our firm's biggest city contract under a new legal entity, his own, and sent me a certified letter explaining it as a necessary business decision. 3 years. I'd given that man 3 years. So, yes. Thursday evenings were complicated now. I was staring at the pasta section of the menu, not reading it, just staring, when the chair across from me scraped against the floor and someone sat down in it. I looked up. She was, I need a second here, because I want to get this right. She was the kind of woman that makes you forget, just briefly, what you were thinking about. Not because she was trying to be. That was the thing. She wasn't trying at all. Her hair was pulled up in a high ponytail, that effortless, slightly undone kind that somehow looks more polished than anything you could plan. Blonde with warm caramel streaks that caught the amber light of the restaurant, like she'd been specifically placed there by someone with a very good eye. A few loose strands fell along her jaw, framing a face that was flushed from the August heat and entirely unapologetic about it. She was wearing a red dress, fitted, with thin spaghetti straps and a layered skirt that moved when she did. The kind of dress that makes a room take a quiet breath. Her waist was something a tailor would use as a reference point. The neckline was simple, elegant, the kind that didn't need to explain itself. At her ears, large, open-circle gold earrings that caught the light every time she turned her head. She set a small purse on the table, pushed a loose strand of hair back from her face, and looked at me. "Someone's sitting here," I said. "I know," she said. "Now that someone is me." She said it without aggression, without apology, and without any particular interest in what I thought about it. She picked up the second menu and opened it like she'd been coming here for years. I could have asked her to find another seat. There were other tables, not many, but a few. But then the waiter appeared, looked between us with the professional neutrality of a man who had seen everything, and asked if we were ready to order. "Pasta here is decent," I said finally. She didn't look up. "What's not decent?" "The prices." She glanced up then, just for a second, and something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. Something smaller than that, and somehow more significant. We ordered separately. She got the pappardelle, I got the rigatoni, and for a long moment neither of us said a word, just two strangers sharing a table in August, each carrying something heavy enough that sitting down had been a relief all by itself. "I'm here because my car died," she said finally. "Right out front. Phone's at 11%. I turned my wine glass slowly in my hand. "I'm here because my apartment is too quiet," I said. She looked up at that, really looked, the way people do when something lands closer to home than expected. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that only happens between people who are both telling the truth. And that right there, was the beginning of everything. Her name was Meg. She told me 40 minutes into dinner, somewhere between the breadbasket and the moment the waiter refilled my wine without being asked, which, at Russo's, meant he'd quietly decided we were staying a while and had adjusted his expectations accordingly. "Meg Delaney," she said, and extended her hand across the table like we were meeting in a conference room, not sharing a candlelit corner table, because her car had surrendered on a Thursday evening in August. "Thomas Birch," I said, and shook it. Her handshake was firm, deliberate, the kind that tells you more about a person than 20 minutes of small talk ever could. Her fingers were slim, her grip confident, and she held eye contact just long enough to make it clear she wasn't someone who looked away first. I respected that immediately. "So," she said, releasing my hand and reaching for her wine, a glass of Pinot Grigio she'd ordered somewhere between the menu and the first basket of bread. "Quiet apartment. Long story or short one?" "Depends on who's asking." "Someone who's been sitting across from a stranger for 40 minutes, she said, "and figures we might as well know why we're both really here on a Thursday." I leaned back in my chair and looked at her. The ponytail had loosened slightly over the course of dinner. One more strand had escaped, curling softly against the side of her neck, catching the amber candlelight between us in a way that felt almost deliberate, like the restaurant itself was in on something. The red dress, the gold earrings, the quiet steadiness in her eyes. She looked like a woman who had dressed for an occasion that turned out to be this, and somehow, impossibly, that seemed exactly right. "Business partner," I said. 3 years building something together. A small design firm, architecture, interior planning, some commercial work. We were good. Better than good, actually. Then we landed the biggest municipal contract either of us had ever seen. I paused. That's when he made his move. Quietly restructured the deal under a new legal entity, his own. Didn't mention it to me. I found out by mail. She was quiet for a moment. "A letter," she said. "Certified mail," I said. "So I'd have to sign for it." Something moved through her expression, not pity, which I would have hated, but recognition. The specific, bone-deep kind that only comes from having lived something similar, close enough to still feel it. "My husband," she said then. Just like that. Calm, even. Like she'd decided that if I was going to be honest, she could be too. 3 years building a wedding planning business together. He photographed. I ran everything else, the vendors, the timelines, the clients, the contracts, the disasters that happen at every single wedding that nobody ever puts in the brochure. She picked up her wine glass. Last month he photographed someone else's life and decided to stay in it. Permanently. I didn't say I'm sorry. People reach for that too fast, and it almost never lands the way they mean it. Instead, I said, "He take the camera?" She looked at me. Then the corner of her mouth moved. Just barely. He took everything with a lens, she said. Left me the client list, the outstanding contracts, the vendor relationships, and the keys to his BMW parked in my building's garage. A beat. I've been driving it every day since. Good, I said. It gets 31 miles to the gallon, she said, which I consider reparations. I laughed. A real one, the kind that catches you off guard, the kind your body produces before your brain gets a vote. And she smiled at that, the first full, genuine smile I'd seen from her all evening. And it was remarkable, not because her face needed anything added to it, but because that smile had a warmth to it, open and unguarded, like a door swinging wide in a house that had been shut up for a long season. We stayed at Russo's until 9:30. We split a tiramisu, her suggestion, offered with a practicality that I found oddly charming. The waiter, by that point, had entirely stopped pretending he wasn't following the conversation. He brought 2 spoons without being asked. What happened over those 2 hours was something I've tried to describe to people since, and I always fall a little short. It wasn't a date. It wasn't therapy. It was something more like 2 people who had both been holding their breath for months, finally exhaling at the same time, in the same room, at the same small table, over pasta that was decent, and wine that was fine, and tiramisu that was, honestly, worth every penny of the price. She told me about the business. 6 events booked through October, 3 florists she trusted completely, a reputation she'd built from nothing and protected through everything. She spoke about it the way people speak about something they genuinely love, not just something they do. There was pride in it, quiet and solid. I told her about the freelance work. Smaller projects now, a kitchen in Mount Pleasant, a sunroom addition out on James Island, but work I controlled. Work where the only name on the contract was mine. I was rebuilding, I said, slowly, deliberately. She nodded at that like it meant something specific to her, like she understood exactly what it cost to choose slow and deliberate over fast and desperate. Outside, through the restaurant window, I could see her car sitting at the curb, dark, still, broken, and entirely unaware of what it had set in motion by dying at exactly that corner, at exactly that hour. When the tow truck finally arrived, she stood up, smoothed the layered skirt of her dress with both hands, and reached into her purse. She set a business card on the table in front of me, cream-colored, clean serif font, Delaney Events, weddings and private celebrations. Thomas Birch, she said, like she was making sure she'd stored it correctly. Meg Delaney, I said back. She smiled, that warm, window-opening smile, and walked out into the August night. I watched through the glass as she climbed into the truck, exchanged a few words with the driver, and disappeared down King Street. I sat for a moment before picking up the card. There was something written on the back, small, neat handwriting, unhurried. Thanks for the table. I was still smiling when I unlocked my apartment door an hour later, but 3 days later, when I finally worked up the nerve to text her, I found out that her ex-husband had beaten me to it, and he wasn't reaching out to apologize. I texted her on a Sunday afternoon. Nothing dramatic, nothing that took 3 days to compose, even though, if I'm being honest, it kind of did. I'd picked up my phone approximately 11 times over the weekend, typed something, deleted it, set the phone face down on the counter, and walked away like it had personally offended me. What I finally sent was, Russo's has a lunch special on Sundays. Thought you should know, given your investment in their pricing structure. I set the phone down, walked to the kitchen, made coffee I didn't need, came back. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then, how's the tiramisu situation? I smiled before I could stop myself. Uninvestigated. I was waiting for a second opinion. There was a pause, longer this time, long enough that I started second-guessing the entire thing. Then, Thomas, I need to tell you something and I don't want to do it over text. Can you meet me? The coffee went cold on the counter. I was already reaching for my keys. We met at a small place on Broad Street, a coffee shop called Harbor Grounds, the kind with exposed brick walls and ceiling fans that moved the warm air around without actually cooling anything. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with both hands wrapped around a ceramic mug, her blonde hair down this time, loose, straight, falling past her shoulders in a way that was simpler than the ponytail, but somehow more serious, like she'd dressed for something that required her full self-present. She was wearing a white linen blouse tucked into high-waisted navy trousers, gold earrings again, smaller ones today, understated, and an expression I hadn't seen on her yet. Not the dry composure from Russo's, not the surprised warmth of that late smile. This was something tighter, controlled the way things are controlled when you're working hard to keep them that way. I sat down across from her. "Tell me," I said. She set down the mug, looked at me directly, that same steady, unflinching eye contact from the night we met. "My ex-husband called my attorney Friday morning," she said. "He never officially dissolved our business partnership. Legally, he's still listed as a co-owner of Delaney Events." She said it flatly, like reading from a document she'd already memorized. "Which means he can claim a percentage of revenue from the past several months. Everything I've earned since he left." I didn't say anything for a moment. "He's filing a claim? His attorney sent a letter Friday afternoon." A pause. "Certified mail." The way she said it, looking right at me, I knew she remembered. Certified mail, same as what Daniel had sent me. The official, cowardly delivery method of people who want to cause damage from a safe distance. "How much is he claiming?" "Enough," she said quietly. "Enough to take out the cushion I've been building for 6 months. Enough to make October look very uncertain." She picked up her mug again. Her hands were steady, which I suspected cost her something. "I've got a consultation with my attorney tomorrow morning," she continued. "But she already told me on the phone, if the partnership documents were never formally dissolved, he has legal standing. It doesn't matter what he did personally. The business structure is what it is on paper." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Who drew up the original partnership agreement?" "He did. His cousin is an attorney, family rate." She said it with a ghost of a smile that had absolutely no humor in it. "I signed what he put in front of me, because I trusted him. Because that's what you do when you're building something with someone you—" She stopped, looked out the window for a half second, then back at me. "You know how it goes." I did. I knew exactly how it went. "Meg," I said, "I know an attorney. Her name is Carol Sims. She practices here in Charleston. Business law, contract disputes, partnership dissolutions. She's the one who helped me navigate what Daniel pulled." I paused. "She is exceptionally good at finding what's wrong with documents that were written by someone who assumed you'd never look closely." Something shifted in her expression. The tightness around her eyes loosened by just a fraction. "You trust her?" "I trusted her when I had no reason left to trust anyone," I said. "That's a higher bar." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, King Street traffic moved through the August heat. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. The coffee shop smelled like espresso and old wood. "Okay," she said finally. "Yes, please." I texted Carol right there at the table. She responded within the hour. She could see Meg Tuesday morning, 8:30. Bring everything. What happened next surprised me. After the texts were sent and the appointment was set, something seemed to release in Meg. Not completely, not dramatically, but enough. She exhaled slowly and leaned back in her chair, and for a few minutes we just talked. Not about the attorney or the documents, or her ex-husband's certified letter. Just talked. About the city. About a restoration project near the Battery that I'd been watching for weeks with professional envy. About whether the coffee at Harbor Grounds was actually better than Russo's espresso, or just felt that way because of the brick walls. It was easy in a way that shouldn't have been possible, given everything sitting on the table alongside our coffee cups. When we finally stood to leave, she touched my arm, briefly, lightly, just for a moment. "Thank you," she said. "I mean it." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "Thank Carol." She smiled, that real one, the one that changed everything about her face, and we walked out into the white-hot Charleston afternoon together. I watched her go and thought, I should tell her. Tell her what, exactly, I wasn't sure yet. But 3 days later, sitting across from Carol Sims in her Broad Street office, I found out that the documents in Meg's partnership agreement had a problem that had nothing to do with Meg, and everything to do with a mistake someone had made a long time ago, deliberately or not. And that changed the direction of everything. Carol Sims had an office on the second floor of a narrow building on Broad Street, 3 blocks from the courthouse, which she once told me was not a coincidence. Her desk was organized with the kind of precision that communicated clearly. I have seen every version of this mess before, and I am not impressed by any of them. She was 62, small, sharp-eyed, and had the particular energy of someone who had spent 30 years watching people sign documents they hadn't read carefully enough. She didn't waste words. She didn't soften things unnecessarily. And when she looked at a contract, she read it the way a surgeon reads an X-ray, not for what was there, but for what shouldn't be. Meg sat across from Carol's desk in a pale blue wrap dress that cinched at the waist and fell just below the knee. Composed, professional, her blonde hair pulled back in a smooth, low bun at the nape of her neck, a few soft pieces framing her face. She had a manila folder in her lap, and both hands resting on top of it, still and deliberate. She looked, I thought, like someone who had decided that whatever came next, she would meet it standing up. I sat beside her. I wasn't her attorney. I wasn't her anything, technically. But she'd asked me to come, and I'd come. Carol read through the original partnership agreement in silence. Meg had handed it over without comment. The only sound in the room was the slow rotation of the ceiling fan and, occasionally, the distant sound of traffic on Broad Street, filtering through the old window panes. After 7 minutes, I counted, Carol set the document flat on her desk and looked up. "When did you sign this?" she asked Meg. 3 years ago, Meg said. "April." "And you never had independent counsel review it before signing?" A pause. "No." Carol nodded slowly, the nod of someone confirming something they'd already suspected. "The dissolution clause," she said, tapping a specific section near the back of the agreement. "It's written in a way that requires both parties to submit a joint written notice of dissolution, signed, notarized, filed with the state. If only one party initiates, the process doesn't trigger automatically." She paused. "Your ex-husband leaving the marriage and the business verbally doesn't constitute legal dissolution under the terms of this specific agreement, which is, I suspect, exactly how it was written." Meg absorbed that quietly. "So he can claim the revenue." "He has a basis to attempt it," Carol said carefully. "However," she turned back to the document, "there's a provision here, Section 7, subsection C, that stipulates any partner who withdraws active operational contributions for a period exceeding 90 days, without formal documentation of approved leave, forfeits their right to revenue claims during that period of absence." The room was very still. "He left in late May," Meg said slowly. "It is now late August," Carol said. "That is approximately 93 days. Something moved across Meg's face. Not relief, not yet, but the first suggestion of it, fragile and careful, like the first light through a window that's been shuttered a long time. "Can we prove he had no operational involvement?" I asked. Carol glanced at me. "Do you have vendor communications, client correspondence, scheduling records, anything with timestamps showing sole authorship from her side during that period?" "Everything," Meg said. "Every email, every contract, every vendor invoice. I run the business from my laptop. It's all documented." Carol allowed herself the smallest of satisfied expressions. Then we have a very strong counterposition, she said. I'll draft a formal response to his attorney this week. We cite Section 7C, submit the operational records as supporting documentation, and challenge his standing to claim anything from June forward. She folded her hands on the desk. This is not a guaranteed outcome, Meg, but it is a solid one. He overplayed his hand. Meg exhaled, slowly, quietly, like something she'd been holding for a long time, finally had somewhere to go. He always did, she said softly. And then, to Carol, how did I miss that clause? You didn't write the agreement, Carol said simply. He did. Or rather, his cousin did. And I'd be willing to bet that Section 7C was included as a formality, the kind of language that's standard in partnership agreements, without anyone on his side thinking carefully about how it might apply if he was the one who walked away. She paused. People who plan exits usually plan them from one direction. They don't always consider the door swings both ways. On the walk back down Broad Street afterward, Meg was quiet. Not the tight, controlled quiet from the coffee shop. Something looser than that. She walked beside me with her manila folder tucked under her arm, and her face turned slightly upward, like she was letting the August sun, brutal and indiscriminate as it was, just land on her for a moment. You okay? I asked. I think so, she said. I think I might actually be okay. We walked another half block. Then she said, without looking at me, your situation with your old partner, is it actually resolved? Or did you just tell me that to make me feel less alone the other night? The question caught me more squarely than I expected. I thought about what I said next for exactly 3 steps. Mostly resolved, I said finally. There's one piece I've been avoiding. She looked at me then, steady, direct, the same way she'd looked at me across that restaurant table on Thursday night. Don't avoid it, she said quietly. It wasn't advice. It wasn't a lecture. It was just the truth, offered plainly by someone who had just spent an hour learning what avoidance costs. That evening, I called Carol and booked my own appointment. And that night, sitting at my drafting table in my quiet apartment, pencil in hand, a half-finished elevation drawing spread out in front of me, I realized something had shifted. Not just in the legal situation, not just in the week. Something in me had moved toward something. I just wasn't ready yet to say what it was out loud. But Meg Delaney, I was beginning to understand, had a way of making things clear. Not by pushing, not by asking, but simply by being exactly, precisely, uncomplicatedly herself. And that was the most disarming thing I'd encountered in a very long time. Carol's office looked exactly the same the second time. Same desk, same ceiling fan, same sharp, unhurried energy from the woman behind it. What was different was who was sitting across from her, and what he'd finally decided to stop avoiding. I'd spent 3 years telling myself that what Daniel had done was resolved, that I'd walked away clean, taken the freelance work, rebuilt quietly, and moved on. Mostly I believed it. But there was one clause in our original firm agreement, a non-compete provision, that Daniel's attorney had reinterpreted in the restructuring, effectively blocking me from bidding on any municipal projects in Charleston County for 2 years. I'd accepted it at the time because I was angry and exhausted, and just wanted it to be over. Meg's 3 words had a way of staying with you. Don't avoid it. Carol read through my documents with the same focused silence she'd brought to Meg's. When she finished, she set them down and looked at me with an expression that was somewhere between professional satisfaction and mild exasperation. You've been operating under an invalid restriction for 14 months, she said. I suspected it might not hold. It doesn't hold, she said simply. The non-compete clause was embedded in a restructuring agreement that you signed under duress, documented duress, given the certified letter and the absence of any negotiation period. In South Carolina, that's a meaningful distinction. She tapped the page. I can have this challenged and formally voided within 30 days, possibly less. I sat with that for a moment. 30 days, 14 months of closed doors, and 30 days was all it would take to open them again. Do it, I said. The last week of August in Charleston moves differently than the rest of the month. The heat is the same, relentless, total, the kind that makes the air above the pavement ripple like water, but something in the city's rhythm shifts. Summer visitors start thinning. The streets belong more to the people who actually live there. And in that particular late August quiet, things that needed to happen seemed to finally find their moment. Meg's counterposition was filed on a Wednesday. Her ex-husband's attorney responded within 48 hours, a response Carol described, with characteristic understatement, as notably less confident than their opening letter. By Friday afternoon, the claim had been reduced to a narrow dispute over 2 invoices from early June, both of which Meg had documentation for. Carol expected full resolution within 2 weeks. I was at my drafting table when Meg texted me the news. Carol says it's essentially over. 2 invoices. That's what he gets. I wrote back. How do you feel? 3 dots. Then, like I want pasta. I was already smiling as I typed. Russo's, 7 o'clock. I'll be at the good table. You mean the only table? Our table, I wrote. And then, before I could second guess it, I sent it. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Our table, she wrote back. 7 o'clock. She walked into Russo's at 3 minutes past 7, and I understood, not for the first time, but more clearly than before, that Meg Delaney was the kind of woman who made a room quietly rearrange itself around her without asking it to. Her hair was down, loose, straight, that warm blonde falling past her shoulders and catching the amber restaurant light exactly the way it had the first night, like the room remembered her. She was wearing a deep green wrap dress this time, fitted through the waist and hips, a neckline that was elegant without trying to be, small gold earrings at her ears. She moved through the restaurant with the ease of someone who had decided, recently, deliberately, to take up exactly the amount of space she was entitled to. She sat down across from me and looked at the table between us. Same table, she said. I asked specifically, I said. The waiter, the same one from that first Thursday, I was almost certain, appeared and looked between us with an expression of quiet, professional approval. Pappardelle? He asked Meg. She looked at him. You remember. Good customers, he said simply, and disappeared toward the kitchen. She looked at me. Did you tell him to say that? I absolutely did not, I said. Charleston just works like this. She laughed, that real laugh, the one I'd been cataloging since the first night, storing each version of it like something worth keeping. And for a while we simply talked. The way we'd learned to talk over the past weeks, honestly, without performance, without the careful management of impression that people do when they're still deciding whether to trust someone. She told me about the new name she'd chosen for the business. Not Delaney Events anymore, something she'd been sitting with for a while, that finally felt right now that the legal situation had cleared. Harbor and Bloom, she said, for Charleston, for the flowers, for, I don't know, starting over but planted somewhere real. That's a good name, I said. And I meant it the way architects mean things, structurally, from the foundation up. Over dessert, tiramisu, 1 order, 2 spoons, no discussion required. I told her about my appointment with Carol, about the non-compete clause, about the 14 months I'd accepted a restriction that wasn't legally sound because I'd been too bruised to push back. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "What does it mean, practically?" "It means I can bid on municipal projects again," I said. "There's a historic restoration on East Bay Street, a pre-Civil War commercial building, been vacant for years. The city has been looking for the right proposal." I paused. I've had the drawings half finished for 8 months. I just couldn't submit them. Submit them, she said. Not a question, not a suggestion. The same quiet, direct certainty she'd offered me on Broad Street. I'm going to, I said. She held up her wine glass. I raised mine. To Carol Sims, she said. To certified mail, I said. Both of ours. She laughed, and then something settled between us, warm and unhurried. The way things settle when they've found the right place to land. I looked at her across the candlelit table, her blonde hair catching the light, her green dress, the small gold earrings. The steadiness in her eyes that I had come to understand was not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of genuine courage. And I said what I'd been working toward for 3 weeks, without quite knowing it. I'd like to keep having dinner with you, I said. Not because of attorneys or paperwork or cars that break down at convenient moments. Just you and me, and whatever this is. She was quiet for exactly long enough that I felt it. Then, Thomas Birch, she said, are you asking me out? I believe I am. Took you long enough. I'm an architect, I said. I measure twice. She smiled, slowly, fully, the way the sun comes up over Charleston Harbor in early morning, like it's not in any hurry because it knows exactly where it's going. Okay, she said. Yes. That was 14 months ago. The East Bay Street restoration project broke ground in the spring. Harbor and Bloom planned its first major event as a fully independent company, a wedding, appropriately enough, at a venue on the Battery. Flowers everywhere. Everything exactly as it should be. We share an office now, on the second floor of a narrow building 3 blocks from Carol Sims. Different desks, different businesses, same morning coffee, same light through the same window, same quiet that isn't empty anymore. Her mother asked, the first time we had dinner with her family, whether I could cook. He knows how to order pasta, Meg said, before I could answer. Her mother looked at me. From where? Russo's, I said, corner of King and Calhoun. Good place, her mother said, and passed me the bread. I've thought a lot about that August, about a car breaking down at exactly the right moment, about an 11% phone battery and a table that wasn't available, and a woman who sat down anyway. People ask me sometimes if I believe in fate. I tell them I believe in August in Charleston. I believe in Frank Sinatra playing in an empty restaurant, and tiramisu split 2 ways, and silence that tells the truth. I believe in second chances, not the kind that fall from the sky, but the kind you have to be broken open enough to actually take. We were both broken open that August, and we were both finally ready. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories about love, resilience, and second chances.